And a series of world leaders have gone to the White House to meet with President Trump since his return. Have you had any conversations with him about you going down to D.C., trying to sort out your tensions in person?
We have talked about that. As you know, we have had many different conversations over the past many months, including two pretty important ones last week. We will continue to engage at all levels and make the case that Canada, as an ally and a partner, is a country that they want to continue to work constructively and productively with as we take on big challenges on the global stage.
With respect to tariffs, has the White House made any demands, or are you navigating blind? Well, those are the discussions we're having with the U.S. administration. I do understand that people might be concerned since there's so many different conversations on tariffs coming up. If we think about it, 3 different tariff threats are facing Canada right now. First of all, 25% tariffs across the board and 10% on energy because of fentanyl, even though we point out that only 1% of fentanyl entering the U.S. comes from Canada. So we have a lot of work to do to show that even if this is a very small problem, we are reducing it even further.
Wants to annex Canada. How serious or urgent would you classify that threat?
Let's be very clear. Conversations around a 51st state are a non-starter. It's never going to happen. But we have to take seriously what the President is saying and fold that into our thinking as we continue to stand up for Canada.
Next question.
Following up on Ashley's point, when Mr. Trump started talking about Canada being a 51st state, your government's original response was to say that it was a joke. Now you're saying that this is a real thing. Can you take us into your mindset? What was the moment that made you switch from thinking it's a joke to a real thing?
I don't think there's a switch. I think, as I've said unequivocally from the beginning, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever be the 51st state. At the same time, from having worked with President Trump for over 8 years now, I can tell you that we have to take seriously what he says and make sure we're responding appropriately. And quite frankly, the response of Canadians over these past weeks has been inspiring, as people have been there for each other, people have been changing their vacation plans, people have been looking at ways to buy Canadian, to support local businesses, to diversify their supply chains to places like Europe and Asia. This is a response of Canadians who are saying, yeah, this is going to be tough, but we're going to double down on Canadian pride and standing up for each other.
Trump again talked about Canada's defense spending, and at one point he said, we don't pay so much when it comes to defense spending. This is a quote, because they assume that the U.S. is going to protect Canada, and that's not an assumption that they can make. If there was to be an attack on Canada, would you expect that the U.S. would respond and defend Canada?
We are all members of NATO. I had a great meeting with the Secretary General of NATO this morning, and we're part of an alliance that is there to stand up for each other. And I will highlight that Canada does take very seriously its responsibilities around defense, not just of Canada, but of North America. NORAD is the only alliance in the world where 2 countries have agreed to work together to protect their own homeland, their own territory. There's no other place in the world where 2 countries work together, and we both do our share of it. We've actually recently invested even more, tens of billions of dollars in modernization of NORAD, because we understand that the world is changing. The peace dividends following the end of the Cold War are over. We need to be investing more in defense. That's why when we took office in 2015 and saw that defense spending was below 1% from the previous Conservative government, we started massively investing in defense, and we're on track to triple our defense spending between 2015 and 2030. And we have a solid and real plan to reach 2% in the coming years. This is something we have taken seriously, and we agree with all our allies, including the United States, that Canada needs to do more. That's why we are doing more.
You spent the last few days speaking with allies here in Europe, but we haven't heard those allies specifically make public statements defending Canada's sovereignty. Where are these allies? Why aren't they standing up for Canada?
I think allies understand, having seen it on TV, seeing even across, I have many, many people talking about how patriotic Canadians have become, how strong and forceful Canadians are at waving the flag these past days. People have been noting and actually impressed by how Canadians have all come together in a very, very strong way. And I can sort of say, as I said, Canadians don't need anyone else telling us that we have a great country, because we know that, and other countries are also taking note.
Can NATO survive Trump, given that he's threatened the sovereignty of Greenland and Canada?
I'm sorry, Olivia, I'm getting a flashback right now, because that was a question we answered, got asked and answered many times over the first Donald Trump mandate. Where there were questions about whether Article 5 would be respected, whether NATO had a future. And here we are all these years later, continuing to commit to mutual defense, continue to invest significantly more in defense than we were 8 years ago. Yes, Donald Trump has had, along with the impact of shifting geopolitics, a spurring effect on just about all countries to do more on defense, to recognize that we are in a more challenging and unstable world. But that's exactly where the value of military alliances like NATO, NATO being the most successful military alliance in history, is all the more visible and all the more important in a world like this.
But don't these sovereign
Question.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. The White House says that the total tariffs on aluminum and steel could be 50%. What's your response to that, and why do you think that President Trump continues to escalate his threats?
I think it's important to understand that Canada will respond as appropriate in a calibrated but extremely strong way, regardless of what the U.S. moves forward with. We don't want to be in a trade dispute. We think that the best thing for all of us in North America is to continue to work together, to focus on some of the international trade challenges, whether it be non-market economies or rising authoritarian economies, that need to be countered by friends and allies working together on energy, on AI, on critical minerals, on the kinds of things that we can do to create shared prosperity across not just our continent, but all Western democracies. This is our focus. If we have to take some time to put that on pause while we stand up for Canadian jobs, while we stand up unequivocally for Canadian sovereignty, we'll do that. It's not our choice. We don't want to be doing that, but we will, regardless of the level of tariffs that eventually the administration might move forward on. We will be equally unequivocal in our response.